to take care of that condition, and we expect that we will be good to proceed here shortly. And the CDR copy.
Well, some pilot out there in an airplane somewhere is getting an earful at this moment and is putting, I hope, the pedal to the metal getting out of there. We don't know what kind of an airplane it is or how they happen to stray into that area, but it's not where they belong. And a little hard to imagine that they got in there with all the flight control systems in this area, that somebody might have said to them at some point, you know, hey, you're in the wrong place. I mean, we've got a lot of look down going on and a lot of look up going on here in terms of flight towers all over the place and the very most sophisticated
I don't have a
military
camera.
system we have, right?
But you can hear me?
There are lots of different ways to file a flight plan, and on a day like today, you
Phil,
really
you
don't
want
need
to
to
just
file one
listen
with
to me? Is
anybody.
that it, or?
So if you don't read the notices there, then you may not even know about it. Of course, it's hard to believe that they would know that this is going on today, but you never know.
Jay Barbary has covered so many of these, and he has never seen it. I don't remember anything like this. You know, we always talk about they're going to clear everybody out. They're going to get the ships off the ocean surface.
Okay.
They're going to make sure that the flight path is clear as it can be. But we've never had to go on hold because there was a plane in the area, and we don't know at this point what kind of an airplane it is. Jay?
Yes, Tom.
Remember anything like this?
Oh, yeah. It's happened time and time again.
Really?
And it's also, yes, it's happened with boats. Probably what we have out there is a sightseer who tried to sneak in a little too close to get a good view of the launch, and now he's getting run out by Air Force helicopters on the scene. So they should have him out of there in a short time. But this happened, and then they get their license suspended and a fine, and there you are. Somebody joyriding to take a good look.
Right. Okay. It's like a streaker at a baseball game. You know, it follows up everybody else's sense and rhythm of the game. Everything has to come to a halt. Well,
In a way, it's like the guy who pitched the ball to McGuire when he broke the record. You know, it's his way of going into history, I suppose.
That's right. Not the right way.
But the pilot of that airplane is in considerably more trouble than either of the other.
Right. That pitcher may get a contract next year. This guy may not. Again, we don't know exactly what kind of an airplane it is or what's caused all of this. Bob
can
Hager.
hold it, this built-in
Tom, they
hold.
just said something odd. They said that they had multiple targets. I think first we heard the commander come on, Kurt Brown, and he said, in effect, what's going on, although it was in pilot talk. And they said, keep me updated. Then they told him that they had unidentified aircraft in the area. They said, again, they didn't know what kind of aircraft it was. Then they said they had multiple targets on the radar, so that's a little confusing. I mean, that could be some kind of radar glitch, too, that indicates that it's not really a plane. Also, you're talking about, you know, whether it's the pilot's fault or not. If indeed there's an aircraft there, or more than one, could be the fault of controllers. You'd think almost it would be more likely to be the fault of controllers, because sometimes the pilots would have no way of knowing at the last minute. It's the controller's obligation to keep them out of there. Now,
Yeah, this whole area is surrounded not only by the most sophisticated military aircraft controllers and all of their electronic equipment, but there are a lot of general aviation and commercial aviation towers as well. And the rules should be well known by today to both the flight controllers and those people who may be taking planes up. But at any rate, we remain in a hold. We're now about 11 minutes past the scheduled liftoff time. How do you occupy yourself during that kind of a situation, Michael? You just keep reviewing the system check?
It's a little tough, because particularly when you don't know when you're going to come out of the hold. On one of my launch attempts, we scrubbed after 2.5 hours into the window because the weather never cleared up. And you basically just have to keep fresh, talk to each other, relax, try to keep in focus what your duties are going to be once the count resumes, because sometimes it happens without much warning.
All right, Jody Applegate is at the Air and Space Museum at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Jody?
And Tom, we've turned our monitor around so the folks gathered here can watch the launch, and they're all kind of standing around with the rest of us trying to figure out what's going to happen. One lady in particular has an interesting perspective on all this. Lillian Eide, you remember John Glenn's first launch. What was going through your mind back then in 1962?
Well, it was such a new thing to think about. And of course, Alan Shepard had already been up and all this, but I was so afraid, you know, that something would happen to this person who had heroic stature And so I was just praying, just like Walter Cronkite. That happened to be the one that I was watching at the time.
You're forgiven for not watching Huntley and Brinkley at the time.
But anyhow, it was just such a momentous occasion, and so I can never forget when, the capsule went up and everything was fine. I mean, you just have tears in your eyes, just in gratitude that it worked out okay.
And you're from Ohio, and John Glenn's a fellow Buckeye.
Yes, absolutely. He's been our senator for 16 years, is it? Maybe more, at least. But anyhow, we're just I was always very proud that he was the person that he was.
And we're very glad that you're watching it with us here today.
Well, thank you.
Thanks very much, Lily, and we appreciate it. Of course, in the crowd, plenty of people who weren't even born when John Glenn went into space last time around. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Jody Applegate. Scott Carpenter, let me ask you, you lost one of the original astronauts from the Mercury 7 group not so long ago, Alan Shepard, who, after all, made that historic and very important suborbital flight. Let's listen to NASA for just a moment here.
Are you ready to pick up at our direction?
We can pick up at your direction, sir, but we prefer 1915.
Okay. And launch director? Go. Copy that. And range, we're going to pick up the count. Attention all stations, this is the NTD. Countdown clock will pick up momentarily. TLS, pick up the count on your mark.
TLS copy. 3, 2, 1, mark. TLS is go for orbiter APU start.
DLT, OTC, perform APU start.
Copy that, in work.
All right, 5 minutes to go. And about 2 minutes ago, you'll begin to see a lot of activity. But briefly, Scott Carpenter, Alan Shepard, who performed that really important suborbital flight, died not so long ago. He and John Glenn, who had been rivals, fair to say, during the early days of the Mercury 7 program, became close again. And John Glenn felt bad that Alan Shepard couldn't be here for this launch because it was something that he wanted to live long enough to see again.
Sure. And I'm sorry, we're all sorry that Al couldn't see this. But that is the way it went, and we live with that.
But you're still a band of brothers in the eyes of the public. Is it true in life as well for all of you?
It is. There is a unique bond and a very strong sense of camaraderie that still exists.
Scott Carpenter, who was here at the beginning, back up to Mercury 7, joins us once again 36 years later.
Final purge sequence.
Again, we're going to watch now as the countdown moves very swiftly as John Glenn and his fellow astronauts prepare to lift off.
To their pre-programmed pattern, and they will be verified they are ready for launch. The 3 main engines are being gimbaled and positioned for launch. All systems are go for launch at this time, just a few minutes away from the 25th voyage of Discovery with a crew of 7.
TLS will hold at minus 31 seconds due to a failure indication.
We have another hold. We have another hold, a failure in the system at 2 minutes and 31 seconds.
Described earlier, this is a known condition.
Pressurization.
That's the condition that they said that there was known.
Just an indicator that was providing inaccurate data.
Clear caution warning memory. Verify no unexpected errors.
No unexpected, so we're no real anomalies here. They're going to be able to keep going. And the clock continues to run.
NTD, CLC, MPS engine 2 pitch, actuator profile, verified nominal. CLC is go for launch. And CLC is NTD, I copy, go for launch. SPE?
SPE is go.
Break, NTD SRO on 212.
Go ahead, SRO.
Yes, sir, we will need to hold the clock. Range is no-go. We have a fouled range.
I copy that, and we'll hold at T-minus 31 seconds. And be advised, our hold time there is 5 minutes and 18 seconds.
Range understands hold time of 5 minutes, 18 seconds.
OTC, PLT, caution warning clear, no expected errors.
Countdown clock will be holding. The Superintendent of Range Operations announcers.
Remove the hold in association with our engine 2 pitch and insert a hold at T-minus 31 seconds due to the range.
Wow,
CLS,
that's really critical, and we're right down now to the very close and critical parts of igniting the big solid rocket boosters, but they put in the 2-minute hold because they've got a problem on the range. That means that there's somebody out there that doesn't belong there, and they're going to have to get them cleared out. That's my assumption at any rate.
I agree. It gets more critical the closer you get to T0, the less and less options that you have. Now that they've started the APUs, they're limited to a certain amount of time. I believe I heard them say that we have 2 minutes in. They're going to stop the clock at 31 seconds. That's sort of a planned point. And they have, I think she said, 5 minutes and a half or something like that available at that point, after which time they'll have to scrub the launch if they don't.
All systems are go. All systems have been reported go for launch of Discovery. Less than 1 minute
We're
away
going
now
for launch again.
the historic return of John Glenn to space.
I copy and attention all stations. The countdown clock will continue.
CLS is go for auto sequence start.
Discovery's onboard computers now have control of vehicle functions. T-minus 20 seconds. T-minus 15. T-minus 10, 9, 8. We have a go for engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery with a crew of 6 astronaut heroes and 1 American legend.
Houston Discovery, roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Discovery Houston, go at throttle up.
Roger, go at throttle up.
All right, Scott Carpenter, the old astronaut, was pounding the chair and laughing and saying, how about that? It's, you never quite get used to it, Scott.
It's hard to be unmoved by that.
What's going on here right now, Michael Lopez Alegre?
Well, first of all, I'm a little choked up. These guys are, they're going to right about ready for the solid rocket boosters to burn out, at which time they'll feel a noticeable deceleration. You'll see the pattern in the TV of the flame coming out sort of change a bit, and shortly thereafter you'll see the 2 boosters separate, and that is obviously a critical milestone. There they go.
Yep.
Now they continue with the 3 main engines. The acceleration obviously is almost back down to 1G, and it will gradually increase all the way to 3 Gs until they reach 1 minute before main engine cutoff.
I don't know what your grandfather is doing today, but John Glenn at 72nd is on his way to space. I'm telling you,
Discovery could
you're
now
not
reach
quite
the
prepared
transatlantic
for that
abort
in
site
some way.
at Banjul. However, telemetry indicating all 3 engines continuing to perform well, and Discovery's performance to this point, 2.5 minutes into the flight, has been as expected. Discovery now traveling at a speed of 3,500 miles per hour at an altitude of 43 miles.
You bet.
Downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, 70 miles. All systems are continuing to perform well.
You think when John Glenn was a young man growing up in Ohio, it was, by the standards of the time, a very modern village, but across America, only about half the homes had electricity then, you know, and cars by today's standards were very primitive indeed. Flight was really just getting underway in the pre-war years, and here he is going up to take a look at the Earth from outer space.
A surprising thing has happened to that man.
Yes.
3 minutes and 40 seconds into the flight, Discovery now traveling at a speed of 4,600 miles per hour. Downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, just about 135 miles. Telemetry indicating that all systems on board are
Negative return.
Discovery copies, negative return.
And with that call, Discovery is now too far downrange and has gained too much altitude to return to the Kennedy Space Center in the event of an engine failure.
Discovery Houston, press to ATO.
Discovery copies, press
Well, Michael,
ATO.
it just sounds fabulous. I mean, the weather is great. All the systems are good. They've gone beyond the point where they can come back here.
Engines are performing at 104%
That's right. We will not
of
see
rated
John
thrust
Glenn in
as
Florida
expected.
today.
No.
4 minutes, 21
That's
seconds
reassuring.
into the flight. Just about 4 more minutes of powered flight remaining. Discovery traveling at a speed of 5,700 miles per hour.
At this point, they're probably
downrange from the
noticing
Kennedy
the
Space Center,
G-forces starting to
200
pick up,
miles.
and it gets, I would say, borderline uncomfortable right about here. Their arms in particular get pretty heavy. Any checklist that they have to hold are noticeably heavier, and they've rolled to a heads-up position, so they really can't see even the pilot and commander much of the Earth. They have to be looking out, and they'll see the black of space for the most part, but I guarantee there's 7 smiling people aboard that.
I would think.
Minutes into the mission, 3.5 minutes.
Well,
of
they had
powered
a
flight
great day at the
remaining.
beach, those folks who gathered here today. It was just perfect. It was the best fireworks display that you'll ever see. I never get tired of it. I've seen a lot of them, and
that call means that
just,
Discovery could now reach a safe
can't prepare
orbit on 2
yourself.
engines. Should one
Let's go to
fail,
Jim
all
Avila
3
now
main engines are
in Concord,
continuing to
Ohio. John Glenn's hometown. They know something about how to grow heroes there, Jim.
Yes, Tom, I'm standing in the auditorium at the Muskingum College, which is the home of the Fighting Muskies, home of John Glenn, where he went to school here. And this place just erupted a few moments ago. There was a lot of tension, as I'm sure there was there, as people waited to see whether or not this countdown was going to go off. And every time it was stopped, everybody got very quiet. And then it erupted at the time of the launch. Most of these people, of course, these kids, were not even born in 1962, but they certainly know about John Glenn. I have one of the students here, if we have just a moment, to talk about. Now, you were not born when John Glenn, of course, took off the first time.
No.
So what are your thoughts now? Why is this important to you now?
Well, it's truly amazing as a student at Muskingum. It's just unreal. The small town, we usually don't see any kind of hype like this for anything, and this past week has just been unreal. There's camera crews everywhere, and that's all everybody's talking about. Everywhere you look, it's John Glenn this and John Glenn that.
Do you feel a certain pride when you saw this launch?
Yeah, a lot more than I really thought I would. I didn't really feel like it affected me, but when it did, I had cold chills, and it was just an amazing feeling that just went all through your body.
All right, thank you very much. And that certainly was the feeling here, Tom, as people who never saw the original flight of John Glenn really were gripped and moved by what happened just a few moments ago. Tom?
Thanks very much, Jim Avila. It's something worth watching again. We want to show you now the final moments before liftoff and then the launch itself. I think it's fair to say, picture perfect.
Heroes and one American legend.
Houston Discovery, roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Michael, we're, about a minute away from it going into orbit, and it's moving at what kind of a speed right now? This is the replay that we're seeing of the launch itself when it left here, but it is out there now, and everything is going as planned.
Well, they're in excess of 20,000 feet per second, which is 14,000 miles an hour, and accelerating quite rapidly.
We're going to have 144 orbits altogether over about 9 days with this. And in fact, the Mercury 7 capsule went around the Earth a little faster, about 2 minutes faster. It took about 88 minutes for an orbit in those days, and these take, what, about 90 minutes or so?
It all depends on the altitude. The higher the flight, the longer it takes to go around. And this is a relatively high flight for the shuttle, 300 miles, so it'll take probably better than 90 minutes, but they're all within a couple, 3 minutes of 90.
John Glenn will be very busy with a lot of scientific experiments, but we hope as well that he'll be able to find a moment by himself, maybe by one of the windows on the shuttle, just to look back at Earth. Do you still carry those memories in your mind?
I try hard. As the more days go by, it's more and more difficult to remember and to realize that it wasn't a dream, that it was reality. But that's without a doubt the best part of the mission, is pasting your nose up against the window and floating there trying to stabilize yourself as you look out at the Earth go by. And I'm sure he'll have many moments of that.
And Scott, you remember that as well, looking back at Earth first time?
That is the most spectacular sight there is. I was thinking also, everyone who has flown in space gets treated a little bit like a guinea pig, the physiological evaluation. But John hasn't seen anything yet until he gets back from this flight.
Scott, what do you think that this says to a generation that did not know the trials of your generation and what you had to push through? Space, war, the Cold War, the whole pushing through the whole nuclear age. We've kind of become, in a way, jaded, I suppose, by the sense of discovery that your generation went through so dramatically.
I really can't answer for this new generation. I can only say I hope they draw some inspiration from what their folks have done, and I hope they get some understanding of the absolute fact that you can do anything you can imagine if you work hard enough at it.
Scott Carpenter, thank you very much. Michael, thank you for being with us today, and to all my colleagues in the NBC News team, all the NASA support that we've had and all the interest that you've shown in this program. However you felt about John Glenn and his mission and the importance of it or the appropriateness of it before that liftoff, I'm confident that it must have changed when those big solid rocket boosters lit up and he left for space at the age of 77, 36 years after he won a permanent place in our hearts as the first American to go into orbit. It's worth repeating what Scott Carpenter said then. Godspeed, John Glenn. I'll see you later tonight.
This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 3 hours and holding. Crew's been awake for about an hour now.
We are watching incoming television pictures from NASA.
They have had their morning meal and are right on the timeline this morning.
When John Glenn lifts off from that pad, he'll reignite the meaning of real achievement.
And we do have the flight crew getting suited up. And we've got payload specialist number 2, John Glenn. This is Shuttle Launch Control at T-minus 2 hours, 58 minutes and counting. Standing by now to receive the crew as they depart the operations and checkout building.
Let's call it a long hiatus. John Glenn, the first American to orbit Earth, is going up again today.
There is a lot of anticipation here and throughout the country.
There's a senator using the handholds to get himself in. Just bounced right in there, and he's up in his seat.
Hello, NTD, PS2, com check, over. PS2, that's NTD, I've got you loud and clear. Welcome aboard, John Glenn.
Good luck, have a safe flight, and once again, Godspeed, John Glenn.
Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery with a crew of 6 astronaut heroes, one American legend.
This has been a presentation of NBC News.